Very first, what exactly does diversity mean? So basically, I checked up the dictionary and I said, okay, so what does diversity mean? So diversity simply means the condition of having or being composed of different elements. So having many people of different kinds. It's a kind of inclusion that we have about bringing people from different cultural backgrounds, different race to coexist together within a given space. So essentially, when we talk about diversity, it's really about being able to acknowledge, and make our differences work for everyone, within the group. So what that simply means is that the power of diversity really comes in the richness and synergy that we can create when we have many people with diverse backgrounds able to see the same issue from different perspectives, and the richness of that view is what we benefit from when we speak about diversity. So when we say diversity as a work issue, what we're trying to look at is what are those things that may make it a bit difficult for the benefit of our diverse backgrounds to get positive results in the workplace. So those are the concerns that we would like to speak about. So in the workplace, we all come from different backgrounds. We need to therefore be able to make those differences count for something. So what I've done here is to provide, from my own experience, a sample of what a typical work environment will look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes to just digest this. It's a small case, and we're going to do a live conversation. We're going to run a poll. Can we mute? Yeah. So I'm going to give you like just 2-3 minutes, maximum of 5, to just read this. And I'm going to be asking you, and try and go through those 3 questions on top. And we're going to run a poll. Let's see. Five, so please, time starts counting now. I'm going to give you, like I said, maximum of 3 minutes. For time's sake, sorry, maximum 3 minutes to go through this. So it's a small team, but a very diverse team at that. If you're ready, you can show me your hand, so let's know you're ready. Okay, I see Grant Edward has raised his hand. Okay, good. Let me see another hand, so that way I know that I'm not just favoring one person. I see Grant Edward is the only hands I see. I have 1 more minute. So let me just allow the 1 minute to exit. So for those who take their time to read, just to be sure that we can all contribute. Okay, 2 participants raise their hands, good. All right. So from this team, we can see that we have 3 people that make up this team. We have the team lead, the person of Adefunke. We can see a bit about who she is, and we have Zainab. We can also see a bit about who she is, and then we have Ifeanyi. I can also see some details about this. So based on the information in all of this material, I'm going to ask us to respond to the following questions. Okay. All right. So I'm going to launch. Good. So you have 3 questions, and I'd like us to respond to those questions. So we use that to drive the conversations for the next 5 minutes. And I'm going to give 1 minute to respond. Can we also use survey? Okay, good. I'm seeing response now. Okay, great. So I'm seeing response. I didn't see response before, that's why. So there are 3 questions. So just click next. When you're done with the first one, just click next until you submit. So you submit. Yeah. Someone is not seeing the full screen. I'm not sure. I know why, because what you should be seeing now is the survey, is the polling. So just click next. Once you've answered one question, click next. It will take you through all the 3. All right. So I think I've got most of the votes in. I still see. Yeah, this is. Yeah, I think I've got most of the votes in. All right. So I'm going to stop the poll so you can continue. Okay. So I'm going to share the results. So from the feedback that you've all given me, I think 47% of the class believe that that diversity is really a serious problem. And it will be, then in terms of what they consider, so the 2 top issues that really come to interesting, that really come out top line is their personal worldviews and gender, okay? And then in terms of the overall effect on work, I have the majority feels negative. So what I'm going to do is just to get a feel for why you say that. Can one person who said it's a very serious problem, can you just, one person just tell us why you think it's a very serious problem? Just one person. Who will volunteer a comment? Well, time is short, so I don't know. I don't want to call names, but
maybe you may have to call names, but you won't even know who.
Yeah, I wouldn't know exactly. I wouldn't know who people was. I would really love to talk about. Anyway, for time's sake, because time is short, I really can't. But what we established from this result, clearly, it's a very serious problem, and that yes, issues are gender and personal worldview, and we see that if the good. Thank you very much for so let's begin to understand why is it such a very serious. Now we talk. Can we unmute? If you're not speaking, can we mute? Yeah, admin, can you please mute everyone, and then I'll mute myself back. Amalola, can you mute everyone? Amalola, can you mute everyone? Yeah. All right. So there are basically two things that, accelerate our personal worldview. So, the two issues, gender, you can't do anything about. I mean, your gender is your gender. It's what we came from heaven. There's little you can do about gender. But in terms of personal worldview, that is really where the biggest issues with diversity truly and really. So the problem with diversity really goes beyond. Can you mute? Gosh.
134. 124 now. Who is 10?
Okay. All right. So we can see here that the real problem with diversity goes beyond just gender and age differences. It includes those seemingly irreconcilable worldviews we have developed as part of our personal history and experience through life. And basically, we'll consider two factors that make this possible. One is the cultural influence, which is the cultural space we occupy, and how that has shaped us. And then in the next slide, we'll look at how the time in which we live through does that for us. So in terms of, how does our cultural space, shape us? Every human being begins life with similar basic needs. We call that human nature, but, the need for safety, survival. It is basic across, across all human beings. But however, as we go through the human experience called life, we do so in the context of various social, cultural, and environmental backgrounds. And it is that interaction between our social context and our human nature within the principle of life that tends to, shape who we are or how we present ourselves. Let me share a story to kind of like send this message home. I remember some years ago, after my youth service, me and my friend, I served in the North, my friend, he served in the East, and his name is Tokumbo, obviously a Yoruba boy. And when he got to his place of primary assignment where he was posted, the family that he put up with. So in the evening of the first day, the woman of the house, quite elderly, brought him a bowl of gari and soup, of course. And Tokumbo, being a Yoruba boy like he is, the was quite a lot, according to him, and he couldn't finish it. So he did the best he could, and out of a desire not to come across as an ingrate, he basically scooped the rest of the leftover and put it in a nylon and put it in a dustbin. And the woman came in the morning to clear up the empty bowl, of course. Now, the following night, when the woman came, the food was more than what she had brought the previous day. Now, this put Tokumbo in a very uncomfortable position. So he tried the best he could to eat what he could. And again, not wanting to be an ingrate, he scooped the balance of it and put it in a dustbin. The third day, the food was even more than the second day. So by the end of the week, his conscience could no longer handle the waste he was bringing to this family. And he called the woman and explained to him in the best way he could that, in all honesty, that he's been wasting food and that he would really not want them to bring this much food going forward. In his mind, he thought the woman was going to get angry, but the woman laughed and was joyous, and he couldn't understand the source of this woman's joy. It was later in his interaction with her that he got to understand that from a cultural point of view, it was a sign of poor host manners for you to give a host, your guest, food and not have leftover, because it showed that you didn't take good care of him. So from the moment he knew that his mind was really, was at peace, he came down. Now, what is the moral of the story? For me, it was one of those moments where you had, cultural conflicts. From the side of the world where Tokumbo comes from, it is considered to be an ingrate for you to leave leftover remnants for your host. From the part of the world where he currently is, for the woman, it was a sign of poor host management not to take care of your guest enough that he can finish what he gave. So this is one of those clear instances where even though they both meant to do good, because of their self-presentations and their cultural background, they are both hurting, both of them were hurting in their own way. On the one hand, Tukun was hurting because he felt he was being wasteful. On the other hand, the woman was also hurting because he felt she was not being a good host to this young boy. Meanwhile, there was really nothing wrong in the context. It was simply a case of two cultures or two people coming from different cultures meeting and having a case of diversity at work or at play. So this basically tries to, the idea behind the story is just to give us a context of how sometimes the way we have been shaped by our cultural, social upbringing, our worldview, the kind of life experience we've had, and our personal human nature tends to, influence and inform how people perceive us. And sometimes we perceive people fairly, incorrect manner because of our own cultural bias. So that is one of the ways by which diversity can oftentimes be exacerbated by virtue of the cultural space that we occupy. The next thing I'm going to talk about is how the times we live in also can be a source of that. Is my slide moving? I'm not sure my slide is moving. Hello, am I still audible?
We can hear you. At least I can hear you, but your slide is not moving.
Yeah, that's what I noticed. It's not moving, and I'm wondering why it's not moving. Okay, let me see if I can correct that. My slide is not moving anymore. I'm wondering why. Let me restart my session. I don't know why my slide is not moving. That's actually frozen. Mola, can you remove the iPad? Let me just switch to my other device.
Okay, you want me to remove your iPad?
iPad, yes. I think that's one that's frozen. So I'll just present from my other device.
Okay.
Sorry about that, people. These things do happen. Technology can be a bit of I do apologize. I'm trying to get my second device to load this up so we can continue. Okay, great. All right. Okay, so tell me when you can see my screen.
Can.
Okay, great. All right, so we talked about the cultural space we occupy. The next thing that basically also informs why diversity can become a great issue is the time in which we live through. By that time, I mean our generational experience being 80 years lives. What I'll try to do here analysis. I don't know if for those of you who are conversant with consulting methodology, PEST simply means the political, economic, social, and technological things at the time. Using the PEST analysis, I'll try to say, look, what was it like in the formative years of each of these generations? And let's see how does that provide a possible framework to understand how this worldview of each generation might have developed. So what this table tries to do is to provide, in terms for each of generations, as provided by common segmentation. Politically speaking, aside for Nigerians, and again, I'm trying to limit conversation to us here. This is us we're speaking about. Within this window, this was where we had a lot of colonization going on, and there was the transition into national pride, independence, and all of that. And the economic reality at the time was driven by the extractive, oil exploration, coal mining. It was really, very extractive in nature. And technology was pretty much manual and driven by blue-collar jobs. And without digital, people in this era had no idea what digital is, so they were distant from digital technology by far. And in terms of the social architecture at the time, it was a very master-servant kind of relationship. And the work ethic, therefore, was very hard work, centric. They valued conformity because it was a master-servant relationship. And it was a very top-down approach to managing people and things. So you don't be surprised, therefore, if people in that generation tend to have a worldview that suggests that, look, just do as you are told, don't ask questions. So, and I don't know, particularly the generation Y and X is amongst us, if you had this kind of experience with people who are in this generation, they seem to have a disdain when you engage them frontally. They like, look, just do what you are told, don't ask any questions. Because again, it's possible that these views have been shaped by the kinds of political, economic, social, and technological exposure they had in their formative years. Now, in one generation X, the same thing, the same logic applies. In their formative years, these guys were exposed. This was a period where we just got independence. It was the First Republic. There was some kind of fairly stable governance. Then there was a bit of disruption of the Civil War. And then the economic engine was very nationalistic inclined. There was a lot of nationalization going on. A lot of the European companies were being nationalized into Nigerian companies. And technology was still very analog, but there was still a bit of, it was a bit mixed sort of. Then we had mobile devices, those big, handsets, but it was a bit of blue and white collar jobs. In terms of digital technology, they were still very far, but, things started picking up gradually. Social structure was very hierarchical. It was command and control. We had, very long, stable, long ladders that were climbing. This was the era where career meant climbing a very long ladder to the top. It was very hierarchical. Ethic of work was, again, alcoholic, very workaholic in nature. And, some of them that the old, master-servant relationship was still lingering. So some still felt uncomfortable interacting with authority figures. So they still had that docility towards authority. And therefore, because of those changes, it's not impossible that could be responsible for that worldview where loyalty and respectfulness becomes a criteria for self-evaluation and other evaluation as well. So like, if you are loyal and respectful to me, then I'll reward you. So I'm sure you find people in this age category who are keen on loyalty. Again, remember that this was a period where independence was just fresh. That whole nationalistic pride was very with that group. Now, when it comes to Generation Y, these are people who are more, between the 81 and 96. So what's going on in that period? There was a time of military regime, and for those of you who remember from the survey, we had quite a number of people in this group here. So if you reflect back at your formative years, what was it like? What were the things you were experiencing at the time of military regime? There was some relative instability in the political landscape. The economic engine at the time was very entrepreneurial. I remember this was when a lot of banks came. The middle class was beginning to grow. Technology became very mixed. We had mobile devices, things became internet enabled. These people began to migrate towards digital world. We call them digital migrants. The social work structure became a bit matrix. So it was a bit compressed, not as tall as it used to be. Then you had a bit of downsizing going on at this period in time. So there was a bit of, insecurities. Then you need to whittle out those who are like you. So work ethic was in those workers as hard as you need to. These guys in this generation today is coming from, this group at this time. So they tend to evolve a worldview where if you think like me and behave like me, then we can roll together. Now, the upcoming generation, Generation Z, are people who, particularly given our own context, these are people they didn't experience military regime, they didn't experience independence. All they knew was democracy. And unfortunately, it was a time with plenty of dilapidating infrastructure. So, their faith in governance was really not exciting. The economic engine for them was very, entrepreneurial. Everybody was doing whatever he could do. This was the advent of the musical industry, the movie industry. It was about creativity. Everybody was hustling for his own self. These guys are digital natives. The digital and high-speed internet is their thing. They can do with your phone things that even with generation Y or Z, X could not even imagine. Social for them is network. Instagram. There are no hierarchies for these guys. It's just flat and network and very informal. So for them, they believe work should be fun like play. They have the same reason why work should be very serious. So it's very common that people tend to see the generation as very, laid back. But for them, it's like, look, that's the world they grew up in, very connected, don't have to stress. Remember, their fathers and their parents were, most of them, well, a huge of them were beneficiaries of the middle class, the growing middle class. So it's very, it's very likely, therefore, that this may be responsible for how they've evolved a worldview where they say, look, if you have the answer to the problem, just come. I don't care where, how you come about it. So you see a lot of these young guys, in a bid to express this worldview, they can be quite easily misunderstood, as being very, careless, as being very, allow me to use the word, very free. And this is probably the reason why they run very foul of the older establishment, hashtag NSAS. So you can begin to understand why it's very easy for this generation to be seen the way they are seen. Now, this is the challenge. Imagine who is perhaps closer to the traditional generation can begin to understand what kind of conflicts they might be having in terms of getting along with work. Hence, I can begin to situate why some people will feel that it has a negative impact on work because their worldviews are just different. They come from a different time, they see things differently. Therefore, their view and perspective on life is completely different. And what even makes this even more challenging is that the pace of change right now is so fast that the difference between generations can be so quick in such a short time. In the past, where technology wasn't so dramatic, the differences within generation really wasn't that drastic. But with the huge pace of change, it makes the differences so glaring. So we then ask the big question: why then is this a work issue? Why really is diversity a work issue? So why do we come to work? Basically, the work environment is set up for two things. Number one, because this is what pays the bills, is when we get productive, that the bills get paid. And then secondly, because a lot of us spend a huge part of our lives at work, the average person spends upward of 8 hours, 10 hours at work, it forms the ideal crucible for human interaction. So what that simply means is that we need to get the best out of that time. So when you now put all of that together, you ask yourself, what are the issues? Why then does diversity become a problem? Why is it such a concern? Because it can affect productivity and it can affect the quality of human interaction. Now, in my research, in my experience, I have tried to put all of the issues with diversity in the workplace under 4 different headings, and we're going to try and talk about that, next. So the first issue is around respect. It's like, what do you mean by respect? It's like that ability to feel a sense of positive regard for other people's personal beliefs and value system. I remember when I was a much younger person and I was working, I think it was one of the organizations where I worked. It was a heavily Indian, organization. And Indians by nature are very Buddhist, right? And at the time I was young, and I didn't quite enjoy the organization. I'd left, my prior organization because it offered me better pay, it offered me more perks. So I was going with plenty of excitement. But what I didn't realize was that I didn't appreciate how much intolerant I was at the time of that huge cultural difference. so giving my own background, my religious leanings and Buddhist leanings, I just could not see myself at the time, being able to have regard, everything about that culture at the time was just it was difficult for me to accord the, my colleagues at work the respect that I needed to feel engaged. And that was a big turn down for me. Going to work became very, very challenging. I was not productive because of that issue of respect. And because of that, it affected my ability to be, lively in the office. And what do I mean by being alive? Is the ability to intentionally demonstrate vitality and energy when engaging with other people, particularly people who are different from you. So because of that fundamental issue of respect, it provided an opportunity for energy to drain from within me. I was not really connected at work. And because of that, whenever I was, needed to communicate with my colleagues who are, of Indian, extraction, I always had my premonitions, I had my fears, I had my paranoia, and it became very difficult for me to understand their views and they to understand mine. So that ability to feel secure, to communicate my needs, my fears with enthusiasm was just not there. And it was just, it limited my growth, because then, if I couldn't communicate, it was difficult for me to, to invest time in another person or in my own person. It was difficult for me to sit down under the tutelage of another person because my mind was just closed. It was one of the shortest experiences and the most unprofitable experiences I had. But growing up, as I began to, reflect and grow up and to go through all of the things I've gone through in terms of development, my worldview started to change. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. My worldview, so one of the things I've used for myself to improve, I'm going to share some of those ideas in the next slide. But as I began to work on myself, work on, my understanding, I realized that really at the base of it, whether you are Indian, Korean, Hausa, Igbo, fundamentally we are human beings and we have basic needs. And the only thing that has made us different in our worldview is the kind of experiences and social context that we've had. It doesn't fundamentally change us as human beings. He is no less human than I am, and they are no less human than we are. So for me, that was the beginning of my change process. And how do I know that I have made progress? Right now, one of the clients I'm working with, they are Indians, and it's amazing how productive, how nearly chummy our relationship has gone. We call each other weekends. We share work brief, we share, all kinds of social complementary pleasantries with each other. And it's amazing looking from where I've come from and where I am now. So what I'm going to do right now is based off of what we just discussed, I'm going to ask you your own experience. So if you look at, if you look at your own work experience in terms of those 4 dimensions, where do you think you have the biggest challenge in terms of working with other people who are different from you? Is it in terms of respect? Is it in terms of being alive? Is it in terms of understanding? Or is it growth? Let's get some feedback. Are you seeing my, okay, good. I'm getting responses here. I wanted to, okay. I'll leave the poll open to get as many responses as possible. Okay. Okay. 20 more seconds, then we'll close the poll. All right. 7 more seconds. There are no more additions. I think it's not moving anymore. Okay, good. So end the poll. All right. So share the results. So what do we see? So we can see that the biggest issue is respect. 33% of the audience here that ability to hold in admiration people's personal values is biggest concern with diversity, followed by understanding. Okay, good. All right, I don't know if people are willing to speak. Is anyone willing to talk to respect? Just one comment, just to create a sense of back and forth. Anybody wants to share personal experience for 1 minute? Still quiet. All right, we have just about 15 minutes left, so let me move along. All right. So basically, what does this mean? So how do we basically then work together with each other? So in my experience, what I found at work, there are 3 things we need to learn how to do if you're going to improve our ability to work with each other's differences. Number 1 is we need to seek our self-awareness of your own personal history. Number 2, we need to be able to locate and connect with the reality of the world around you. The world is bigger than one entity. So how does the world connect with me? How do I connect with the bigger space of things outside of me? And the third area is how do you develop your collaborative dialogue, ability to communicate in a collaborative manner. So I 3 big buckets of ideas that I have always resorted to, and as often as I use them in my personal coaching work, I have got some good feedback. Now, what do I mean by seeking self-awareness? It first begins with a sense of curiosity about yourself. Who exactly am I? How do I function? How am I made up? Now, one of the things one of the tools I use is the MBTI, and it's one of the things I'm certified in. I remember when I first in one of the places I used to work, I used to have a lot of problems with people, and I never understood why it was like that. But when I did my MBTI, the MBTI basically profiled me along 4 dimensions. And when I read it, it gave me a sense of, wow, so this is really why the issues that I deal with, why I deal with them. And that for me was like a source of objective feedback. I mean, it was not somebody who didn't like me. It was a very objective tool. And it gave me insight into how my mind works. And it tried to give some kind of behavioral explanation. So what it then does is it allows you to relate. When people say, oh, Kyle, you're like this, I can then say, after it wasn't personal, it was truly how they experienced me. And then it helps me get a sense of implication of my behavior and my presentation to other people. And over time, what it allows me to do is it gives me a sense of an understanding of the pattern of my mind. So I know what exactly I can do. I know what situations trigger my displeasure. I know what situation triggers non-productivity. I can either compensate or altogether avoid it. The next thing then how then do I realize that, look, if the world is bigger than me, if there is more to the world than my own view, how then do I locate myself, connect with that reality? And again, there are 5 things I've learned how to do. Number 1, I've learned to observe the world around me. I've learned to open my eyes and say, okay, what's going on? When I look at people or I talk to people, I don't just listen to what they say. I'm asking myself, what exactly is not obvious? What are they saying that I'm not hearing? Or what do I need to understand? So I learned how to listen for what people mean, not just what they say. I mean, I remember one of my prior work situations, there was this lady that, we had some projects together, and she had her assignment to do. And I mean, she comes from a very different background than I do. I'm he, she, and other things. So the following morning, I went up to her and I said, look, give me feedback. And she fled up and she was really, really very, very angry. And luckily I didn't say anything. Okay, I tried to ask myself, okay, so I mean, why would make this lady, why would she be so upset? anyway, with no answers, I went back, but I knew something was obviously amiss because this was not a typical reaction. Then later in the afternoon, she came back and said, look, Tayo, sorry, I said that my son has been having this illness for the past 2 weeks and he's not responding to treatment. And, the weekend, I'm not sure, I don't know about the weekend, but the weekend he had a major meltdown and I've just been all over the place. Now, what that did for me was that, it helped me to situate the emotional outburst that she gave me. She really didn't mean to be angry. She was just trying to express an inner frustration. So I've learned to listen for what is meant, not just what people say. And in a way, learn to listen to the language people speak. I remember one time, I used to have a colleague in my former place of work. I noticed that, she doesn't really wear heavy makeup. So one particular day, she was wearing quite heavy lipstick, very dark lipstick. And I said, sorry, it's not like you. Again, I can hide that because I also observe that. Like, it's very unlike you to wear that lipstick, But I do like it. I mean, what's up? She looked at me and said, how did you know? I said, because it's not like you to wear that. Long story short, she told me that whenever she does that, it's because she's trying to mask up a very, difficult experience she's going through at the time. Okay. Now, what that then does is that it puts you in a place where you then understand what you need to do. So you can understand the role you need to play in those circumstances, whether be of help or to really connect with the person at that place of need. Then, of course, the last thing is around your dialogue. I mean, if there is one thing that I've learned or observed that causes problems, is this word: I don't like the way you spoke to me. I don't like the way that guy spoke to me. I don't like the way you said that. And it goes down to the power of the dialogue. And when you speak with people, you need to have these 4 things at the back of your mind. Number one, the things I say with this person, how does it show commitment? Or am I coming across as being dodgy? But 2, does it portray a sense of coherent action? Like, these are the things we are going to do, and this is how they connect with each other. Does it show a sense of common ground? As if, look, we are in this together, so I'm not just doing this for my own selfish benefit. How do I, manifest or demonstrate the commonness of the objective? And lastly, how do I make them developmental in the sense that how do I help this person to see how they benefit developmentally from how this work is going to be done? So basically, those are the ideas that I've used in my own life journey, and they've given me results that I feel confident to share. And I believe that as often as we try to do that, you might also find some of these ideas quite useful yourself. So on that note, that is all I've got to share in terms of how do we manage diversity in the workplace. This is the time for questions. Lola, I'm going to hand it over back to you to coordinate this section with Eni. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bakari. That was quite insightful. And I have 1 or 2 questions, but I cannot see any question from any of the participants. It's quite a very quiet class today. I don't know, or shy class. I don't know, but anyway, we still have some more, like 5 minutes, and we can still take questions. So I would just like to find out, since we know that now that diversity and differences in the workplace have come to stay, I mean, you see people in the generation Y, I mean, the older generation working with people in the younger generation. I mean, that's Gen Z, I think, people from 24 downwards. And I mean, it's come to stay. And in a team now, alone, there can be, a lot of diversity, big diversity and differences.
Sorry, I've lost you, Lola. I can't hear you. Hello? Lola, I cannot hear you if you're speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I lost you for quite a while.
Yes, my network it's fluctuating. Okay, so I was trying to ask that since diversity has come to stay, and we see a lot of diversity even in team members. So I would like to find out, how can business leaders, HR leaders, and probably managers and team leads, how can they help to, in quotes, maintain order in their teams and in their organization? I mean, this topic is something that has been trending for a while, and we cannot, close our eyes to how important it is in organizations. So how can business leaders kind of like maintain order? You see a team where probably one of the team members is like probably 47 and the head of the team is probably like 30. That's quite wide. So how can we maintain order in organizations? Is it through constant training, awareness? So what do we really do to tackle this?
Thank you very much, Ola. That's a very good question, and it's really helped. I think let me begin by saying that evil thrives in darkness, all right? So I think the first thing that leaders and organizations need to do is to create an opportunity to actually discuss these things in the open. Because if we don't bring them to the open, the wounds will keep festering and it will generate into very unproductive work behavior. I think the first thing is to actually create an opportunity where people feel free to talk about these things more openly. I think that's the very, very first thing. The second thing is then to say, okay, using the framework that I shared, how do we help each person? Because again, we all come together as individuals into a group. How do we help each person understand, first and foremost, their own individual difference? How am I different from this person? So you begin to understand that I am in this position not because I'm necessarily better, but because I am just different by virtue of the experiences I have had through life. So it then takes away that chip on your shoulder that maybe, one of the reasons why those kind of unhealthy, instances tend to happen. People tend to feel that because I went to an Ivy League school, because of this, therefore I'm fundamentally better, therefore they feel they have a right to rub it in your face. And I think we need to help people come to terms with the fact that difference does not mean better. Difference simply means that you have had a different track and I have had a different track. And what we then need to do is, how do we create a center place where each person can bring the best they have to offer and we can all learn from it? So for example, the person who's been in the organization for 20 odd years, you can't buy experience, right? So there are things that this individual has seen or has learned over the course of him or her being in that organization that the guy who is coming with the technology can use. So that's institutional knowledge. So I am 47 or 57, I have institutional knowledge. You are 24, you have tech knowledge. How can we bring the best of both worlds to leapfrog the organization? That is a conversation we need to have. So I have experience, you have technology. How do we make those two opposites work? And the beauty of development really is about how do we reconcile opposites? My experience, your technology, how do we make that work? So for me, those would be the two ways that we can begin to address those issues. One, let's talk about them in the open. Number two, how do we create a center where all parties can bring the best they have to offer to create a mix that is truly unique and different. Hello.
Okay, just one last question. Yeah, that was great. So one last question. I'm thinking, because I've spent some years in HR. I've come to understand a lot of things when it comes to people management and recruitment and all that. So I'm wondering, is it at the point? Do we consider this at the point of recruiting staff or recruiting employees? Because I think people need to learn how to, be team players. Really, it's very, very important, because once you enter a team or an organization, you tend to notice, okay, who are those around me? The people we are actually recruiting to our organization, can they actually find out if there are people that can actually adjust, at that point of entering an organization? Are they people that will work well with other people, no matter how different they are? So I know, because I'm asking this because I know there are lots of HR professionals in our midst, and they may want to see, okay, how they can help when they're recruiting or when they're building their team or when they're doing their workforce planning.
Yeah.
Did I make sense?
Yeah, useful question. Now, I mean, generally speaking, regardless of whether it's diversity or not, the recruitment function is probably, if not the most important function within any organization, because who you give the rights of citizenship to is probably the most fundamental question you need to resolve. So yes, we need to be very deliberate about who we allow to be part of organization. But more importantly is the effort we make at creating environments where even if peradventure, there is a recruitment error, one person cannot be greater than the environment. So if we have put in the infrastructure, the culture, the conversation, where these things don't fester, even when occasionally we make those hiring errors, the system will usually either catch, correct, or kick out such individual in the long run. So it's both ways. Yes, we need to be careful, more deliberate, let me put that word, more deliberate about who we bring in. But more importantly, we need to realize that diversity is really good for the organization. So the more varied our pool is, the better it is for the organization. So it's a case of, look, let's be deliberate in how we set up those hiring practices to actually allow for diversity. So maybe what we even call hiring errors, maybe they're not even hiring errors. Maybe it's a reflection of how obsolete the current workforce thinking is, So yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, it's about how do we create a culture or an environment within that is truly embracing of diversity. So that even if someone comes in as allow me to use the word, a misfit initially, we create a platform where they can, one, contribute, two, they can then learn, and the system can then rub off on them in the long run, and then they feel like, yes, I've come to a place where I can contribute my own difference to make up a bigger, piece of the pie. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yes, perfect sense. Okay, so we need to move on right now. There's some questions, and okay, this is from Barira, and he or she saying, apparently companies with very diverse teams tend to have increased productivity and revenue growth.
Absolutely.
Which is very true. However, a lot of the data backing this is not local. Do we have statistics that are closer home in Nigeria? I don't know. Do you understand that?
I understand. Yeah, first of all, I think when it comes to data in Nigeria as a whole, we are just beginning to create a culture of data collection. So the reach of data in Nigeria is still evolving. When I was trying to build up this material, I also did try to find some empirical data to kind of like share, but it was very difficult. So yes, the scope of data in the country is a bit, scarce, and but yes, the jury is out for sure that companies with diverse teams produce more. The question is, how do we create an environment where that kind of diversity is celebrated and allowed to contribute? Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question for Basirat, I think.
Okay. This is from Mr. Edward Davis. Okay, so he said, how will the future of work harmonize the various generational gaps existing within the workforce? How will the future of work harmonize the various generational gaps
Interesting.
within the workforce?
Very interesting. Personally, I'm always very careful to speak about the future categorically because the future is such a dynamic thing. It's hard for anyone to just say with any certainty that it's going to be like this. But one thing we know for sure is that the future will not be like the past. Now, what's happening today that may give us an idea of what the future will be like? I think first and foremost, the future of work will be one where knowledge will become the primary driver of value, knowledge and technology. So it then becomes a case of where and with whom can we access the most knowledge and with the most, agile technology. So if the onus therefore is on each generation to make themselves relevant, because when that future comes, and when the generation you belong to, allow me to say that, does not possess the knowledge to be of help, then there is no basis to mine that generation. And that's why I encourage you, regardless of your generation, to try and keep abreast so that your repository of knowledge, relevant knowledge, becomes your bargaining chip. So even when technology comes to synergize what you know, you become a group that needs to be mined, and therefore your relevance in that future is secured. That's the best I can say for the future. Like I said, it's difficult to predict any certainty what the future will look like in any clear terms.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Okay, so we're moving on. This is from Grant Edwards. How do we handle, and a very funny question like that, how do we handle a Generation X boss who demands so much respect, such as demanding you to come to his office to greet him every morning and expecting you to not talk whenever he's talking, and also demands that you stand up? Are there still people like that when in the office, whenever he's talking to you? Apparently a boss who wants everyone to fear him. So how can this be balanced, knowing that it affects employee mindsets?
Okay, let me share a very personal experience. In the company where I did some consulting work for last year, I mean, there was a leader who, I mean, I don't think the case was like this, but there are certain, the feedback was that this person was very toxic. He only him was doing the work in his own view. He had little regard for anybody, all of that stuff. So when I went and I met with them, what we did was we had like a 360, and we were able to then provide some authentic feedback to the individual. Sometimes, and I'm not saying all the time, sometimes a bit of self-awareness is helpful to begin the journey of change. Secondly, I mean, I'm a student of psychology, right? And the truth is, so oftentimes people are a representation of their history. So it will be interesting to understand what has transpired in this person's life history that has made him the person he is today. Why is he so hungry for power to the extent that he would run rough shoulder over anyone and everyone? Why is he so demanding of respect? Is it a reflection of certain things that has happened? Remember when we talked about cultural space? We talked about the human nature and the experiences he had, and helps to create what we see today. It's possible that quite a number of things have happened in his life. Let me give you an example. There's a young colleague that I work with. Now, I noticed that she's always forever putting herself in very difficult situations. And I'm like, why do you do this to yourself? Why are you so hard? And there's nothing I didn't say, but she just seemed to listen. So one day we got talking. I said, look, tell me a bit about yourself. I mean, then in the course of our conversation, I learned that her dad died while she was very young. Her mom was not very financially important. So she had to learn to be tough with life. She had to learn to be tough with herself. And she had to learn to set very, very, very high goals for herself so that she could be assured of some kind of decent future in life. And apparently, she didn't realize that now that she was a bit more matured, married with kids, she didn't realize that things have since changed. And it was hard for her to see that it was time for her to turn off that part of her that was so driven and allow me to word crazy. So sometimes it helps. So that has been, it's been a difficult conversation, but knowing that helps the journey of self-awareness that, okay, maybe this is why I come across this way. Again, remember that each individual you see is a mix of your human nature plus your experiences and the social context around your personal history. So there are like two things I would recommend. One, self-awareness that might be helpful. 360 be a good way to start. And then it'd be useful to help get a sense of personal history. How has this person become the person he or she is? I don't know if that is useful in the context of the situation.
Okay. But going forward on that question, so I mean, I think he's asking on behalf of probably the team members or the employees working with that particular boss. Okay, so what do they do? How do they handle the situation since their boss is always expecting them to respect, greet him or her when they come to the office. So as an employee, how do you handle such a boss in this day and time, especially a Gen Z employee that is all techie, that believes work has to be fun, doesn't see the seriousness on having to be so serious, greeting your boss. I mean, so how does that employee, how does he survive in that kind of work environment?
Fantastic. So I'm going to be very honest. It's going to be challenging, all right? But it's not impossible. So there is something we talk about, and that's about managing your boss. So the first thing I'll ask the individual concerned to understand is, one, you need to be able to put your boss in your boss in some kind of a is necessarily directed at me as a person. Is just a function of who he is as an individual. I think that's the first step that individual needs to take. And secondly, he then needs to ask himself, what exactly does this person want? Make a list as clearly and as as he can. He wants this, he wants this, he wants this, he wants this. Now, what are my own strengths? What do I bring to the table? I can bring this, I can bring this, I can bring this. In the context of what I can bring and what he wants, where are the points of intersection? So my technology, how can I demonstrate? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to win. How can I show this person that with my technology, I can help you achieve this? Under the understanding that whatever pushback or blowback he gets, it's not personal. So like I said, in my view, in my experience, those are three things that I would honestly, recommend, and I've seen work. One, come to a place of understanding where this is not personal. This is not, it's not about you, the person going through this. There's just a function of the person's makeup. It's not you. So depersonalize the issue. Number two, as possible, clearly as you can, understand what exactly this person wants. Number three, understand what you have to give and how what you have to give can help him achieve his goals. Like I said, it's not an easy journey. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's doable, and I've seen those things work.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. This is from Dolapo. So it says, what's the role of company culture in bridging the challenges brought about by this generation diversity? So I think that relates to the question.
Yeah. I think culture has been, overrated. And how do I mean? Culture is not, particularly in the corporate world, culture isn't a static. Culture is a dynamic, right? Culture simply means how we need to do things to get things done. Now, when the larger context is changing, any organization should therefore ask themselves, how do we retool our culture to be appropriate for the times in which we live in? So it goes back to the organization. So if the world around you is getting more diverse, if the world around you is getting more technologically, fast-paced, if the world around you is changing, then we need to go back and ask ourselves, how do we make our culture more reflective of the bigger society? So where culture has become so obsolete to the point where it is no longer relevant to the bigger context, then we'll have these kind of issues. Because again, remember that the individuals who come to work in the organization, they belong to a bigger context called the bigger space, the bigger culture. So the extent to which your own internal culture is so diametrically opposed to the larger culture from which the generation come from, you're going to have issues. So my suggestion is that from time to time, organizations should ask themselves, how can we, dipstick our culture to be sure that we are not necessarily too far flung away from the reality of the times in which we live. So that's the way I would try and respond to that. This is one moment where organizations have a responsibility to ensure that the culture within which they have to do the things they do is not too diametrically opposed to the larger context in which they are situated. Yes, there is need for difference to show your uniqueness and your strategy, But some people should be able to identify with some elements of the bigger culture from which they come from, the organization. That's what I have to say with that.
Okay, sir. Thank you. This is from Mr. Ulupinga. He says, what role does a good company policy play in solving this problem? Does it play a major or minor role? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, policy is like, you compare policy is like the hardware. You compare hardware and software to computing. So the hardware gives you like the rigid outline of what's possible. But the software is what really brings the hardware to life. So policy is like the hardware. So you say, okay, this is the policy documented. But we all know that there's a difference between what you espouse, policy, and what you actually do. So what policy does is it provides a framework, a guideline. So yes, policies help in providing that framework, that boundary. But there is a lot more that the organizational players now need to do to ensure that policy does not just remain a document gathering dust on the shelf.
Yeah.
We need to ask ourselves, how do we ensure that policy leaps out of the pages and become the daily experience of the individuals who make up the organization? That, for me, is a big challenge. How do we make policy leap out of paper to become a living experience of people?
Okay, thank you, sir. This is a very interesting question from Beatrice. Based on your explanation about the experienced person and the techie person, who should be the boss? The experienced person or the techie person? What's the ideal standard?
When I say, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what boss means here, but ultimately, I think the bigger question is, where does value come from? Where does value come from? Now, I wish I could have a further drill down into that. When you say boss, are you referring to the hierarchical placement, as in who reports to who, or are you referring to who should spearhead, the initiative in the team? I'm not sure I understand what boss means in that context. But
I think that she means probably a team lead or the manager. When you have experienced and techie people, or experienced person, techie person who leads the team. I think I'm right, Beatrice. You can just respond on the chat box.
So again, okay. So there are ways to look at this. There is the hard and fast structure of the organization. So, for example, every company tries to have a structure. So, this is the head of the team. These are the roles I report to that team. So that's a structure. The onus is on the system or the process to ensure that the process is able to feed each role with the best fit for that unit or for that organization. That is the onus of the process. So things like your performance management, things like your development processes. How do you ensure that over time the best person for the role is always sitting in that role? When that is happening, we would have minimal cases of these kinds of misalignment. However, there is also, in my experience, something you call informal authority. So there is the leader who is there by virtue of the placement in the box, but there is the leader who people tend to gravitate to by the amount of value that this person brings to the team. Now, and that's what I was trying to explain, that it depends on where the value is coming from. So if the individual who is the value driver is not the person who is sitting in the topmost box, then over time, it becomes apparently clear that you want to get anything done. This is the low value happens, therefore becomes, if you didn't have a leader who is very insecure, that can present a different kettle of fish, which then goes back to the issue of how do you then manage your boss. If you are the driver of value and you are not the official authority figure and you have an insecure boss, how then do you manage your boss without coming across as being threatening? That is a different kettle of fish, and that requires some organizational and political savvy to deal with. Those are the realities of organizational life, and those things will not go away because politics is a factor of human existence. If you have two or three people working together, you are bound to have some elements of politics to one degree shape or the other. But these are the issues you want to consider. Where does value come from? What is the alignment between the value driver and the formal authority figure. Those are the complex dynamics you want to, bring on the table discussing those issues. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Yeah, that was very helpful. But I would also like to say something. I think we should all just learn to be team players and work together, draw on each other's strengths. So just because you're a manager in a team does not mean you should kind of like play down on each other's strengths and weaknesses. You may be the manager and you may have a team member that is more techy than you are.
Yeah.
So the essence is just try and work on each other's strengths and weaknesses, and I think we can all work together in respect of our differences or our generational differences or life experiences. We should all learn to be team players, learn to work together, draw on each other's strengths, draw on who can do this better. Like in my team, I know who can make calls faster. I know who's better with talking to prospects. I know who's better with social media. So I let them do it. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I don't think everybody, sees things like this, but I have learned to draw on my team members on their strengths and their weaknesses. I know who can get this done faster. So let him do it. I know who can do this better. Let her do it. So it doesn't matter whether I'm more experienced or I'm more techy. So we should all just learn to be team players, work together better, and we can all get our work done faster. So I think that is the last question for now. So we're gradually coming to the end of the session.
Yes. I would like to get some feedback. So I'm going to launch this poll. Just give me a sense of how you found this session. Was it useful? Was it not? Wow. Okay. So I think I'm going to end the poll. Okay.
People are still voting.
Yeah, plastic voting. I see plastic voting. So in 5 seconds more, so that we can go home, because I'm sure everybody is eager to go home. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm ending the poll. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I think I have 28 respondents, half the class, not bad. I'm glad you found it extremely useful, 86%, and somewhat useful, 4% for people. I hope that whatever value you took from it, you can find room to apply it and enjoy working together with people who are more different and diverse from you. On that note, I'd like to say thank you and hand over back to Amola for closing remarks and all of that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakari. I really appreciate the time and taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And I want to thank every participant again, and I hope we'll see you at the next session in March. Thank you so much again. The meeting is officially closed. But like we always do, please unmute your mics and help us thank Mr. Bakari for the learning session. It was a good one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Bakari.
Thank you, Mr. Bakari.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bakari.
Thank you.
I'm grateful.
Very insightful session.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. So if you're joining us for the first time, you'll likely be added, or you are most likely going to be added to our WhatsApp platform. So it's just so that we can keep in touch with you. Thank you very much again, and have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.